The drop. The wind screamed in my ears like a tormented soul, relentless and piercing, as I hurtled through the pitch-black void over Nazi-occupied France. It was October 1943, and the icy gale clawed at my face with invisible fingers, numbing my cheeks to the point of pain and whipping involuntary tears from my eyes that froze almost instantly in the high-altitude chill. My parachute harness dug into my flesh like unyielding iron clamps, biting through the layers of my jumpsuit, while the silk canopy snapped open above me with a thunderous crack that reverberated through my body, jolting my spine and making my teeth clatter together. At 28 years old, I, Elias Thorne, was no longer the quiet, bookish translator eking out a living in the foggy streets of London, the Special Operations Executive. The SOE had forged me into a weapon of shadows and deception, honed in the damp, misty Scottish Highlands where I'd learned the arts of sabotage, hand-to-hand combat, and cryptography under the watchful eyes of stern instructors. Bilingual from birth, thanks to my American mother's bedtime stories in English and her whispered French lullabies from her Parisian childhood, I could slip between languages like a ghost between walls. The Blitz had stolen everything from me in a single night of horror, a roar of bombs that shook the earth, flames licking the sky, and the acrid smoke of our burning home filling my lungs until I coughed blood. I could still hear my sister's final, piercing cry amid the crumbling rubble. See my parents' silhouettes against the inferno before they vanished forever. Revenge wasn't the fire that drove me. It was something colder, more calculated duty, an unyielding sense of obligation to strike back at the machine that had crushed my world. But as the French earth loomed below me, emerging from the darkness as a mosaic of moonlit fields patched with shadowy hedgerows and distant clusters of trees, terror gripped my throat like a vice, squeezing tighter with every second of descent. Was this madness? Had I signed my own death warrant by volunteering for this drop? My boots finally hit the sodden ground with a wet, squelching thud that jarred my knees and sent mud splattering up my trousers in cold, clammy specks. The impact rattled my teeth and sent shockwaves up my legs, leaving me winded and sprawled in the damp grass. I gasped for air, the damp night air thick with the scent of wet earth, freshly turned soil, and the faint, pungent whiff of distant manure from some unseen farm. The stars wheeled above in the vast sky, indifferent witnesses to my vulnerability, their twinkling light mocking my isolation. The silence after the drop was deafening, broken only by the distant hoot of an owl, and the rapid, erratic beat of my heart pounding in my ears like a drum of war. I lay there for what felt like an eternity, but was probably only seconds, ears straining for any sign of enemy patrols, the crunch of boots on gravel, the low growl of a motorcycle, or the bark of a guard dog. The cool grass tickled my neck as I slowly oriented myself with the compass strapped to my wrist, its needle glowing faintly green in the dark, pointing me toward my rendezvous point. I scrambled to my feet, legs shaky from the adrenaline, and gathered the billowing parachute, its silk whispering softly against my gloved hands, the fabric slick with dew and clinging like a lover's embrace I didn't want. My fingers, stiff and numb from the freezing descent, fumbled as I dug a hasty, shallow grave in the soft, yielding soil, dirt crumbling under my nails and caking my skin with its gritty texture. The earthy aroma grounded me, a reminder that I was now on hostile ground, every action a potential betrayal of my presence. Heart still hammering like a war drum in my chest, I shouldered my rucksack. It was heavier than I remembered, laden with the crystal hum of the portable radio set, the oily, metallic weight of explosives and detonators, and the crisp, forged papers dubbing me Etienne Duval, a wandering mechanic from the South with a backstory I'd memorized like a prayer. Every twig that snapped under my cautious footsteps sounded like a gunshot in the stillness. The faint baying of hounds echoing from some distant village sent chills racing down my spine, my breath coming in shallow, foggy puffs that hung in the cold air. The night air also carried the faint, comforting scent of wood smoke from a nearby farmhouse, a sign that ordinary life persisted even under the iron heel of occupation. But it only heightened my paranoia. Was that smoke from a collaborator's hearth or a resistance safe house? As dawn's gray fingers began to creep over the horizon, painting the sky in subtle hues of purple and pink, I reached the weathered barn that was my landmark, its aged wood creaking gently in the breeze, redolent of dry hay, livestock manure, and the faint mustiness of stored grain. The door loomed before me, rough-hewn and splintered from years of use, its hinges rusty. I knocked softly, the sound muffled, and whispered hoarsely into the crack. "The wine is sour this year," my voice barely audible over the pounding of my pulse in my temples. The farmer, Jacques, materialized from the shadows inside, gripping his shotgun tightly in calloused hands, his breath sour with the remnants of garlic from his meager supper and an underlying note of fear that I could almost taste. His eyes, wrinkled at the corners from years of squinting into the sun and now narrowed in suspicion, scanned me from head to toe, taking in my muddied uniform and the desperation in my posture. After a tense pause that stretched like eternity, he grunted, "Come, Anglais, the Marquis awaits." His voice was gravelly, like stones grinding underfoot on a country road. The door groaned shut behind us with a finality that sealed my fate, enclosing me in the barn's musty warmth, and I tasted the bitter tang of uncertainty on my tongue, mixed with the faint sweetness of stored apples piled in a corner. Inside, the dim light from a lantern revealed stacks of hay bales that could hide a man, farm tools with metal edges glinting ominously like weapons, and the soft snuffling of a cow in its stall. Jacques led me to a hidden ladder leading to a loft, his steps silent despite his bulk, and I climbed, each rung creaking under my weight, into my new world of shadows. Shadows in the village. Saint-Lô nestled cozily in a verdant valley, surrounded by rolling hills dotted with ancient oaks and fields of wheat that swayed in the wind like golden waves. But now the idyllic scene was marred by the occupation. Its ancient stone cottages huddled together like frightened children under slate roofs, slick with the residue of recent rain, water dripping from eaves with a rhythmic patter. Swastika banners flapped lazily in the breeze, their crimson fabric a stark, bleeding wound against the faded blue shutters of the homes, the cloth snapping sharply like distant gunfire, a constant reminder of the enemy's grip on Vichy France. Jacques' attic became my first true refuge, a cramped space where the air hung heavy with dancing dust, motes caught in the slivers of sunlight, piercing through cracks in the roof tiles. The floorboards groaned protestingly under my weight as I unpacked my gear, my fingers still trembling slightly on the radio's cold, smooth metal dials, the scent of moldy straw and aged wood enveloping me like a suffocating shroud. The space was tight, with low, slanted beams that forced me to stoop to avoid bumping my head, and the occasional scurry of mice in the dark corners added to the constant unease, their tiny claws scratching like whispers of betrayal. The resistance cell gathered in Jacques' cramped kitchen that evening, the room illuminated by a flickering kerosene lamp that cast long, wavering shadows across the rough, whitewashed plaster walls, making the space feel both intimate and claustrophobic. The air was thick and comforting with the aroma of thin potato stew bubbling away on the cast-iron stove, mingled with the pungent, earthy pipe tobacco from Pierre's weathered lips, curling blue smoke lazily upward to the low ceiling. Pierre, the blacksmith, was a towering bear of a man, his massive hands calloused and perpetually blackened from endless hours, hammering at the forge, carrying the faint, acrid scent of hot iron and coal that clung to his clothes like a second skin. Young Luke fidgeted nervously at the scarred wooden table, his boyish face flushed with the raw excitement of youth, his eyes wide with the thrill of danger and adventure, his clothes still holding the fresh, loamy scent of the outdoors from his recent scouting mission through the fields. Madame Duval, frail in body, but with a steely resolve etched in the lines of her face, kneaded dough with flour-dusted fingers that moved with practiced efficiency, her apron stained with the marks of years of labor and hardship, the rhythmic thump of her hands on the wooden board echoing softly like a heartbeat. The stew's steam rose in lazy tendrils, carrying hints of onion, thyme, and other herbs scavenged from the overgrown garden behind the house, a small act of defiance in gathering what the occupiers hadn't requisitioned. And then there was Marie. Her presence struck me like a sudden gust of wind bursting through an open window, fresh and invigorating, yet carrying a hint of storm. She entered the room, carrying a wicker basket brimming with apples, their crisp, tart scent cutting through the stew's earthy warmth like a sharp knife through butter. Her raven hair was tied back with a faded red ribbon, stray strands escaping to frame her storm-gray eyes that held depths of unspoken sorrow and unyielding determination. At 25, she moved with a grace born of necessity and quiet hardship, her simple cotton dress whispering softly against her legs as she set the basket down on the table with a gentle thunk. "You're the new one," she said, her voice a low, melodic lilt, with a French accent that rolled like the Seine's waters, sharp as the blade she casually set on the scarred tabletop beside the bread. I met her gaze over the steaming bowl she handed me, the warmth of the food contrasting sharply with the lingering chill in my bones from the night's drop. "Don't get us killed, Etienne." Her lips curved slightly in what might have been a wry smile or a challenge, but her eyes held a guarded fire, reflecting the lamp's dancing flame like mirrors of her soul. I nodded, forcing a wry smile despite the tight knot of anxiety in my stomach, the stew's salty broth coating my tongue and warming me from within, its simple flavors a luxury in these times of rationing. "I'll do my best, mademoiselle." As we ate in the dim light, the clink of spoons against earthenware bowls and the murmur of hushed plans filled the room, but her proximity stirred something deeper within me. The faint lavender soap on her skin, a rare luxury scavenged or traded on the black market, mingling with the room's myriad odors and creating a scent that was uniquely her. The conversation that night was terse and laden with caution, Jacques outlining the cell's recent operations in his gruff, no-nonsense tone, his pipe puffing intermittently like a signal fire, while Pierre grunted his approvals, his deep voice resonating like the strike of a forge hammer on anvil. Marie's input was precise and incisive, her words cutting through the smoke-filled air like light-piercing fog, revealing a mind as sharp as her eyes. I listened intently, absorbing every detail, my mind racing with the stark reality of my new life days of hiding, nights of action, and the constant shadow of death. The night wore on, the lamp's flame guttering as the kerosene ran low, casting the room in deeper, more ominous shadows, and I felt the weight of camaraderie beginning to form, fragile as a spider's web. Over the next few days, I settled into the rhythm of the village, learning its secrets, the hidden paths through the woods where Maquis fighters like us could move unseen, the signals in window curtains to indicate safety or danger, the way the church bell tolled with coded messages for those who knew to listen. Marie took me on a walk through the fields one afternoon, the sun warming our faces, the grass swishing against our legs, and we talked of life before the war. Her as a schoolteacher in a nearby town, me as a linguist in London. Her laughter, rare and musical, echoed in my mind long after. Whispers of doubt. Winter descended upon us like a heavy, unrelenting shroud, blanketing the landscape in white, the frost crunching underfoot on frozen paths that glittered like scattered diamonds in the pale moonlight, the air biting with the sharp, invigorating promise of snow that stung any exposed skin like tiny needles. Our breaths puffed out in thick white clouds during early morning scouts from the dense woods, where the pine needles released a sharp, resinous aroma that masked our whispered strategies and plans, the cold seeping insidiously through layers of woolen clothing to numb fingers and toes until they ached. The wind whistled mournfully through the bare branches, carrying the distant rumble of German trucks on the main road, a constant reminder of the enemy's presence. My radio sessions became sacred rituals of high tension and solitude. Huddled in the attic's biting chill, wrapped in a threadbare blanket that smelled of mothballs, I'd hunch over the compact set, the faint crackle of static prickling my ears like distant gunfire on a quiet front line. Coded messages from London tapped out in rhythmic Morse code dots and dashes that hummed through my headphones with a faint buzz. The metallic tang of battery acid faint in the air, each transmission a fragile lifeline fraught with the risk of detection by German direction-finding vans that prowled the countryside. The radio's dim glow was the only light in the darkness, casting eerie, dancing shadows on the attic walls, highlighting the cobwebs in the corners. Our first major strike was the infiltration of the German supply depot, a squat, foreboding concrete bunker squatting on the outskirts of town, ringed by jagged barbed wire that snagged at my clothes like greedy, thorny fingers grasping for flesh. Midnight cloaked us in a velvet darkness, the moon veiled by thick, scudding clouds, the ground slick with dew that soaked through my boots, chilling my feet to the bone. Marie and I crawled through the tall, whispering grass on our bellies, its wet blades brushing our faces and necks, carrying the fresh, loamy scent of fertile soil disturbed by our passage. Pierre's diversion, a series of flares hissing and popping like improvised fireworks, lit the sky in bursts of brilliant orange, the acrid smoke stinging my eyes and throat, making them water profusely as tears streamed down my cheeks. The flare's harsh light momentarily revealed the guards' silhouettes against the night, their cigarettes glowing like tiny fireflies in the dark, their voices murmuring in German. Inside the depot, after cutting through the wire with pliers that clicked softly, the air was stale and oppressive, heavy with the grease of machinery, the musty odor of stacked paper files, and the faint chemical smell of ammunition crates. My lockpick scraped against the metal door with a grating whisper that seemed deafening in the heavy silence, my heart pounding so loudly I feared it would betray me, as heavy boots echoed faintly on the concrete floors nearby. Pausing, as if sensing something amiss, the files rustled under my gloved hands, crisp maps detailing troop movements, encrypted codes that could unlock Enigma secrets, vital intelligence that could save lives. "Halt!" The shout pierced the night like a siren, freezing my blood. We bolted into the darkness, bullets zipping past like angry bees, splintering wooden crates with sharp, explosive cracks that rang in my ears. The river's cold embrace shocked my system as we dove in, the water roaring in my ears, tasting of mud, algae, and desperation as it filled my mouth during frantic swims across the current. On the far bank, gasping for breath, our drenched clothes clinging like icy second skins, we collapsed in a heap of manic, hysterical laughter, the release of pent-up adrenaline leaving a sour, metallic taste in my mouth. Later, back in the barn's hay-scented warmth, the straw prickling through my clothes, Marie bandaged my grazed arm with gentle, steady precision, her fingers warm against my chilled skin, smelling faintly of medicinal herbs and her own subtle lavender essence. "Reckless fool," she murmured, her breath close enough to feel on my cheek, her eyes softening for the first time. Our eyes met in that charged, intimate silence, and desire ignited like a spark in dry tinder, warming me more than any fire. The bandage's rough fabric contrasted with her tender touch, a duality that stirred my soul deeply, making me question if such feelings had a place in this hell. As the weeks blended into a monotonous blur of vigilance, doubt crept in like the persistent fog that blanketed the valleys at dawn, obscuring everything in a gray haze. The operation to derail the munitions train was our next bold move. We planted the charges under the cover of a thick, cloying fog that muffled our steps and conversations, the damp mist clinging to our skin like sweat, the iron tracks cold and slick under my callousing hands, their rusty surface flaking slightly. The explosion, when it came, was a deafening roar that shook the ground beneath us, metal screeching like a dying beast in prolonged agony, flames leaping high into the night, with the acrid bite of gunpowder, burning oil, and twisted steel that scorched the air and seared my lungs. From our vantage point on a nearby hill, the heat washed over us in intense waves, mingled with the metallic scent of blood from the fallen guards we had to dispatch in silence. The thrill of victory was fleeting, soured when Luke disappeared the following day without a trace. Rumors of milice collaborators, the Vichy militia loyal to the Nazis, slithered through the village like insidious serpents, poisoning the well of trust among us. The village whispers grew louder, neighbors eyeing each other with newfound suspicion over fences, in the market where scrawny vegetables were bartered. Alone in the attic during sleepless nights, I'd lie awake staring at the beamed ceiling, the chill seeping deep into my bones, despite the blanket. Memories assaulting me like enemy fire. The Blitz's sulphurous hell, the choking dust of rubble filling my lungs and coating my throat, the crushing weight of loss pressing on my chest like a physical force. Killing now stained my hands irrevocably, a sentry's warm, sticky blood spurting as my knife sliced through flesh in a swift motion, his final gurgle wet and desperate, bubbling in his throat, the coppery smell lingering on my skin long after I scrubbed it raw with cold water. The ethics of it all blurred in my mind, like ink in water. Was I becoming the monster I fought against? Or was this the grim price of salvation for others? Moral ambiguity gnawed at my soul like a persistent, dull ache, keeping sleep at bay as the wind howled outside the attic window, rattling the panes. Moments of cowardice crept in, too. I'd hesitate before a mission, my hands shaking as I loaded a pistol, wondering if I could run, hide, survive without this fight. Marie became my tenuous anchor in this gathering storm of doubt. In a secluded glade far from the village, where sunlight dappled through rustling leaves overhead, the grass soft and damp beneath our bodies, we shared stolen moments of intimacy. Her kisses tasted of forbidden apples and desperate urgency, her body warm and yielding against mine, skin smooth and soft under my rough, scarred fingers. "I'm not who you think I am," she confessed one twilight, her voice trembling slightly as she opened a hidden locket around her neck, the cool metal warming in my palm as it revealed a tiny, engraved Star of David. Jewish heritage from my grandmother. If they discover it... Fear sharpened her beautiful eyes, making them glisten, the forest's bird calls, distant stream gurgle, and the buzz of insects mocking our fragile vulnerability in this moment of truth. I held her close, the scent of her hair like wildflowers crushed underfoot, promising protection in a world where promises were as brittle as glass under a boot. The locket's chain was cold against my skin, a symbol of her hidden burden, and I felt my own secrets pale in comparison. The terror of Luftwaffe flyovers intensified our fears, their engines droning like angry hornets, swarming the sky, the ground vibrating under their ominous shadow, sending us scattering for cover in ditches or under trees, hearts racing with primal terror as bombs whistled in the distance. The infiltration. Spring thawed the frozen land with a reluctant, gradual warmth, the mud sucking greedily at our boots during long treks through the fields, the air alive with the sweet, heady perfume of blooming wildflowers. Violets and daffodils, clashing grotesquely with the underlying rot of war, the stench of unexploded ordnance and abandoned battlefields. Marie and I grew ever closer in those hidden interludes, our bond a fragile light piercing the encroaching darkness, our conversations deepening into shared dreams of a post-war world, walks along the Seine, children laughing without fear. The Gestapo raid shattered our fragile peace one stormy night that felt like the end of the world. Heavy boots thundered on the cobblestone streets, their rhythm like a march of doom, shouts in guttural German echoing like thunderclaps through the village, mixing with the crack of lightning overhead. I hid in Madame Duval's dank cellar, the earthy smell of stored potatoes and mold overpowering my senses, cobwebs brushing my face like ghostly fingers in the pitch-black darkness, the dampness seeping into my clothes. Overhead, furniture crashed with violent, splintering thuds. Interrogation snarled viciously with slaps and cries. Jacques' muffled screams of pain piercing my heart like daggers, his voice breaking under the strain. The storm outside raged unabated, rain lashing the windows and sheets, mirroring the chaos within. We mounted a daring rescue at the break of dawn, when the sky was a bruised purple, gunfire cracking sharp in the crisp morning air, the bitter cordite burning my nostrils and leaving an acrid taste, the iron tang of blood mixing with the fresh, wet morning dew on the grass as bodies fell. Jacques was freed, but his eyes held a new, haunted emptiness, his body marked with purple bruises and cigarette burns that made me wince. Paris called for our next, daring infiltration, the command post in a grand hotel requisitioned by the Nazis, holding crucial intelligence on defenses. The train journey was a rattling, bone-jarring ordeal, coal smoke belching black plumes that stung the eyes and coated the throat, the compartments stuffy with the odor of unwashed bodies, stale bread, and palpable tension from passengers averting eyes. Marie's hand in mine was warm and reassuring, her faint lavender perfume a fragile shield against the encroaching fear. The city upon arrival assaulted every sense, the acrid diesel fumes from military trucks rumbling by, the murky, fishy stink of the Seine River swollen with rain, cafes buzzing with officers' boisterous laughter, and the clink of wine glasses amid the deprivation and hunger of the locals. In a dimly lit Montmartre studio, our contact space reeked of oil paints, turpentine, and unwashed linens, the canvases leaning against walls like silent sentinels guarding secrets. "Klein's safe holds the keys to their defenses," he hissed through a haze of cigarette smoke curling blue in the air, his hand stained with vibrant pigments as he pointed to a sketched map. The plan was laid out on a paint-spattered table, details scribbled in code. Posing as a waiter in the opulent hotel, I navigated the marble halls with silver trays heavy in my arms, balancing plates of food, the air rich with the savory aroma of roast meats, buttery sauces, and fine wines, decadent indulgences amid the widespread starvation that made my stomach growl. Marie's flirtatious laughter with a leering guard twisted jealousy in my gut like sour wine turning to vinegar. The safe clicked open under my tense, sweating fingers. The papers inside crisp and damning with troop dispositions. But alarms blared suddenly, a harsh horn cutting through the night like a wail of betrayal. We fled into the labyrinthine sewers beneath the city, fetid water sloshing around our ankles in cold waves, rats squeaking and scurrying in the darkness, the overwhelming stench of decay, human waste, and rot gagging us as we pushed forward through the slime. The water was icy, seeping into our shoes and numbing our legs, the echoes of our footsteps and heavy breathing amplifying in the confined tunnels. Back in Saint Loup, the tension was palpable, thick as the humid summer air that followed, with storms brewing on the horizon and lightning flashing distant warnings. Fractured bonds. Summer's relentless heat baked the parched earth under a merciless sun, dust kicking up in dry, choking puffs with every step, sweat trickling salty rivulets down my back, stinging my eyes and soaking my shirt. Marie's mysterious absences gnawed at my mind like a persistent, unrelenting itch. One thunderous night, as lightning cracked the sky in brilliant forks and rain pounded the roof like relentless artillery fire, she confessed in halting, tearful whispers. I informed once, under their torture. The pain, it broke me temporarily. Her tears were hot and salty on my cheek, the petrichor of fresh rain mingling with our shared despair and the scent of wet earth rising, thunder rumbling like distant bombs exploding. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy as the oppressive humidity, forcing me to confront my own trust issues. The bridge sabotage mission turned into a disastrous ambush. We wired the explosives with hands slick from nervous sweat, the chemical bite of dynamite sharp in the nostrils, the river gurgling ominously below the iron structure like a warning. The convoy arrived prematurely, engines growling like hungry predators, tires crunching gravel with menacing intent, headlights piercing the twilight. Gunfire erupted in a chaotic, deafening symphony, bullets whining past like lethal insects, ricocheting off metal with pings. Pierre's massive body jerked with multiple impacts, blood spraying warm and sticky across my face in a horrific mist. I dragged Marie away through the dense underbrush, thorns tearing at our skin and clothes like claws, leaving bloody scratches, her sobs raw and heartbreaking in the night air. The pain of loss was immediate and crushing, Pierre's final grunt echoing in my mind like a ghost, his eyes glazing over. Later, wounded in a subsequent skirmish with a patrol, a bullet grazing my side with a burning, searing pain that made me gasp. Fever burned through me like a raging wildfire. Hiding in the dense woods, the feverish hallucinations were vivid and tormenting, the charred scent of my family's home during the Blitz, their accusatory whispers carried on the wind through the leaves rustling like pages of a judgment book turning. Paranoia thickened the humid air around me, every shadow a potential traitor, the incessant buzz of insects around my head adding to the descending madness, sweat mixing with blood on my skin. Interpersonal conflicts flared like wildfires in the dry heat. Madame Duval accused Luc of carelessness in a sharp, hissing voice during a meeting, her finger pointing like a dagger, while Jacques withdrew into a brooding silence, his pipe smoke a constant, acrid veil hiding his thoughts. I mediated, but my own impulsiveness showed when I snapped at Luc, regretting it immediately. Another mission added to the strain, blowing up a fuel depot. We crept through rain-soaked fields, the smell of wet earth and grass filling the air, thunder rolling. The explosion lit the night, but a collaborator spotted us, leading to a chase that left me breathless. The betrayal, as cryptic whispers of D-Day filtered through my radio's static, buzz-like swarming insects in my ears, each crackle a potential harbinger. We planned our most audacious strike yet. The assassination of SS Sturmbannführer Klein during his inspection tour. The woods near Compiègne, where I had first landed months ago, now whispered secrets through their rustling leaves, the ground soft with fallen needles, the rifle's oiled metal cold and reassuring in my grip, its weight a comfort. The plan was meticulous, positions marked on a crude map drawn in charcoal, contingencies discussed in hushed tones. The ambush unfolded with initial precision, the car's tires screeching on the dirt road as it rounded the bend, our shots cracking like whips in the air. But then the betrayal from within struck like a dagger. Luke, his face twisted in desperate anguish. "For my family! They threatened them!" he yelled before Marie's bullet silenced him forever, his body slumping against a tree, blood blooming dark on the rough bark, the metallic scent sharp and nauseating in the still air. The Germans swarmed like disturbed ants from a kicked hive, capturing Marie amid her fierce struggles and kicks, her screams echoing through the trees like a siren's wail of despair. The echo of torture haunted my thoughts, their brutal methods, pliers pulling nails, electricity coursing through bodies, screams that never ended in the night. I infiltrated their makeshift camp under the cover of a moonless night, the air crisp with pine resin and the underlying tang of fear. Guards' snores providing scant, unreliable cover as I crept past tents. Her cell was a makeshift shack, dank with the acrid smell of urine, sweat, and despair. Her face bruised and swollen, lips cracked. "They made me talk a little," she whispered brokenly, her voice hoarse. "Run, Elias. Save yourself." But I couldn't abandon her. The fight out was a frantic blur of knives clashing in the dark, grunts of effort and pain, the warmth of blood spilling on my hands as I dispatched guards. The chaos was intense, punches landing with dull thuds on flesh, the taste of my own blood in my mouth from a split lip, the smell of gunpowder mixing with sweat. Cornered in a clearing within the woods, a young German soldier, barely older than Luke, pleaded with trembling voice, "Bitte, I have a family," showing a crinkled photo of his child from his wallet, his breath reeking of cheap tobacco and fear. I hesitated, the moral dilemma tearing at me like sharp claws, spare him and risk him alerting others, or kill and add another ghost to my conscience. "Go, and don't look back," I growled finally, humanity flickering amid the surrounding horror. His footsteps faded into the night, leaving me with a heavy, lingering conscience that weighed like lead. Traf. The chase through the streets of Paris was a nightmare unfolding in real time, our feet slipping on slick cobblestones under a pouring rain that drummed relentlessly, sirens wailing piercingly in the night like banshees. Narrow alleys reeked of overflowing garbage bins and desperation, shadows lunging like living enemies from every corner. We scrambled over rooftops, the tiles slick and treacherous under our hands and feet. The city sprawled below under sweeping searchlights, like accusatory fingers probing the darkness. The rain soaked us to the bone, cold and relentless, mixing with sweat and blood. Descending into the catacombs for cover, the air turned thick and musty with the scent of ancient bones, damp stone, and decay, our torchlight flickering erratically on walls lined with grinning skulls and femurs stacked like firewood. The Germans closed in relentlessly, their shouts echoing distorted through the twisting tunnels, flashlights piercing the gloom like lances seeking prey. I set hasty traps with remaining explosives, the blasts rumbling the passages with dust-choking explosions, rocks crumbling in mini-avalanches that blocked paths. The explosions echoed deafeningly, dust filling our lungs and causing coughing fits that betrayed our position, the taste of grit on our tongues. Marie collapsed amid the underground chaos, her wound festering with a foul, putrid odor that turned my stomach and brought bile to my throat. In a hidden safe house above ground, the doctor's herbal poultices, smelling of bitter herbs and alcohol, failed against the rampant infection, her hand growing cold and limp in mine as life ebbed slowly, her breaths shallow. We evaded another patrol in the streets, hiding in a bakery's basement, the scent of old bread and yeast a brief comfort. Echoes of loss. Marie's death came quietly in the dim room, her final breath a ragged, fading sigh, her eyes dimming like stars swallowed by dawn's light. Grief hollowed me out like a gutted shell, leaving an emptiness that echoed with every heartbeat. Comrades lost one by one, Pierre's unyielding strength gone forever, Luc's betrayal a bitter, indigestible pill, Jacques broken beyond repair, his spirit shattered. I transmitted the hard-won intelligence to London from a hidden spot, the radio's static a hollow, mocking farewell. But the triumph tasted like bitter ashes in my mouth, devoid of sweetness. Slipping south through enemy lines to link with the advancing Allied forces, their tanks rumbling like approaching thunder on the horizon, diesel fumes heralding the scent of impending liberation. I survived by sheer will. But the man who had dropped from the sky that fateful night was forever altered. My naive idealism shattered into irretrievable fragments, replaced by a hardened realism forged in the crucible of fire and loss. Yet, a spark of compassion lingered like a stubborn ember in the ashes. The memory of that spared German soldier, perhaps alive somewhere, and Marie's enduring love etched indelibly in my soul, a beacon in the dark. War's futility loomed large in my quiet reflections, the endless, staggering human cost, paid in rivers of blood, shattered souls, and broken dreams. As distant liberation bells began to ring faintly across the countryside, hope flickered uncertainly for a world reborn from the ruins. But my scars remained raw and aching, the fight far from over in the bittersweet dawn that promised more battles. The road ahead stretched long and uncertain, filled with unknown perils and ghosts. But I pressed on, haunted yet resolute, carrying the weight of heroes and traitors alike.